Hello, welcome to the first of our new series of our webinars. Trying something a bit different, trying it through Facebook this time. So hopefully this works and it all goes live correctly. Obviously I'm just gonna shift that over there so we can see obviously the Coventry logo. So I'm Craig Lashford, and hopefully you had a good chance to watch my webinar that I put together, a bit different to how we did them last time. So rather than kind of the 50-minute long sessions, we did kind of a nice short snippet 20-minute session. I threw in a few bits of animations and stuff as well, so I'm hoping that was appreciated to mix things up. But we decided that rather than having that long Q&A afterwards as well, we'd kind of follow it up with, straight after the session, we'd follow it up with something a bit more informal like this. So we've had a few people sending questions in, and I've got my fantastic colleague, Tom Lavers. So hopefully you all remember Tom from his webinar, but I'll let Tom introduce himself now. Go on, Tom, explain who you are.
Oh yeah, thanks Craig. Yeah, hiya folks. Yeah, Tom Lavers, another geography lecturer at Coventry, and also interested in flooding stuff like Craig has covered with you just now. So yeah, have lots of my own questions as well I'd like to discuss with Craig.
I like when you refer to things as flooding stuff. I tend
Yes.
to do that quite a bit as well. That's the broad ether of things that we do. You may have hopefully noticed that we've started to increase some of our output on social media as well. So please, I should have put our links up, shouldn't I? That's the first one. Things to be learned for next time, Tommy. I should have put our Instagram, our Twitter, and our Facebook page, and obviously our YouTube page as well. I should have put links to those, or at least an icon for it. Please do give us a follow, give us a like on social media. Our Facebook page, we're particularly trying to push at the moment. So if anyone, that's why we're doing this all through Facebook Live. If you can have a watch and like us, follow us on Facebook, we'd really appreciate it as well. It's just another way of you being able to keep in touch with us, really. But anyway, these sessions are going to be quite, like I say, quite informal. They're going to go as long as they need to, but we don't really want to go over half an hour. So it's just going to be a bit of a Q&A between some of the questions that people have asked, really. Anything that's on Tom's mind. There is a Mentimeter. As anyone that's seen any of our previous webinars will know, we love a Mentimeter. So there is a Mentimeter link, so please pop that on. I've got that next to me here, so I can see anything else coming in as well. Just ask away if you've got any questions. This will be saved as well for future, so you can come back to some of the questions as well. We will be keeping this on Facebook and maybe even uploading it to YouTube as well. So yeah, I suppose over to you, Tom. You've got some of the questions.
Yes, thank you. Well, yeah, I had a couple of questions that have come in that I think a lot of people have obviously gathered this has been a really interesting and pertinent presentation. I think recently global population is very close to 8 billion now. Awful lot of those people now live in cities. So yeah, really interesting stuff. One question regarding, I suppose, the SUDS element of the content that you've covered. How do the SUDS link up across a management train? And someone said just a bit more detail in regards to that.
Yeah, so I think it's quite interesting, the management train. It's the thing I've really pushed in terms of my research. It's the thing I'm really quite passionate about. And I think I mentioned it in the seminar, in the webinar, sorry, that what we often do is do things in isolation. So we put a green roof on a building. Cool. We put a permeable pavement 5 miles that way. Or we put a dirty, great big pond in. Anyone that lives in like a new build estate in the last 10 years or so, you probably would have seen exactly that. We put big ponds in to try and capture all stormwater. The management train approach is a bit different, and it provides this added level of resilience through cumulative devices. So what I mean is, by what my research was trying to see is, if we, for example, found that a green roof was able to reduce 1 litre per second runoff, and a permeable pavement on its own was able to, I don't know, reduce 3 litres per second of runoff, would our cumulative reduction be 4 litres per second, or would it actually be more like 6 or 7? Do we get benefits by combining devices together? Because essentially you're slowing the flow, and as soon as you start to slow flow down, you allow for more infiltration. And what my research found was exactly that. By adding devices together, you can really start to slow that flow down, offer more infiltration, and therefore really start to reduce your peak. So a management train is all about combining SUDS together rather than having them individually on their own. You can do this by linking them up through traditional pipes. or we can use Swales. One of my students, actually, I was teaching this in a bit more detail to some of my second years recently, and one of my students beautifully referred to them as just green pipes. And actually, he kind of is right. They're just green channels, and you link different suds up, so permeable pavements and green roofs and a pond. It's quite challenging. Going back, sorry, to your point, Tom, we're having these massive, we have huge populations now. It's very challenging to try and fit this in to our urban landscape. So it's really is a testing point, I think, to when we can do this in our urban areas, really. But it's
that's actually very poignant, actually. I mean, one of the follow-up questions is, a lot of the stuff you've covered is very exciting. The management train, applying SUDs in a sort of integrated way to solve real-world problems, not just flooding, but the water quality and so on. But to what extent have these sorts of measures been employed across all sorts of new developments?
Yeah, I mean, there are some excellent examples. So the Hamilton example that I showed in the webinar, I think is, and I genuinely believe is one of the best examples. I've been really fortunate to we're not far at all from that. We took our final years now, actually, the other day. So we bringing that into our final year hazards degree. I think varying levels of success, I'd say, Tom. I think it'd be unfair to say that we don't now incorporate SUDs at a lot of new builds, because we do now. SUDs are becoming more commonplace. But actually, this this management train approach at new builds, it's certainly not always done, because it takes up quite a bit of land. So if we're thinking of average houses, if we're thinking house price of $250,000, and you're saying, well, actually, I want to put SUDs down instead of building 10 houses, well, you're looking at a £2.5 to £3 million loss by integrating SUDs. Now, there are obvious long-term benefits of doing it, but it is a real challenge. And I think it requires a real sea change in how we do things. And we are, like I say, we are seeing that. But yeah, I think trying to do it, and there are other examples. Certainly, Upton in Northampton's a great example. Lamdrove, Cambridge. There are some great examples of it being done. But I would argue they're probably not, in terms of management trains anyway, quite so widely integrated.
So it was really interesting looking at your example in China of sponge cities, and an area where space isn't too much of an issue because it's so vast and enormous. Is there anything like sort of the Chinese sponge city concept that's applied elsewhere? Because that seemed very ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and it obviously, I mean, and Tom, Tom's asking that question knowing full well as well that as soon as we saw that come in, I would be happy, because as Tom knows, I'm really interested in this sponge city idea. I've been fortunate to go out a few times to China to go and study it. Obviously before the pandemic, I should add. But yeah, it's quite interesting. Because of how iconic it actually is, there are other countries are starting to kind of take hold of it. So I know that certain parts of Malaysia have really taken this idea of sponge cities and started to incorporate it in parts of Kuala Lumpur and some of their newer cities. Putrajaya outside, which is one of the administrative capitals of Malaysia, has actually incorporated massive ponds to deal with their, essentially the building of a new city in the last 15 years. There are quite a lot of these big, ambitious, projects, but they are exactly that, Tom. They are very ambitious, and they require a lot of money. They require a lot of top-down investment, and given the economic challenges that we've not just seen over the last 15 years with the recession, moving into what we're seeing now, kind of post-pandemic economic influences, I think it's fair to say that there are going to be financial challenges. And let's be completely honest, this is a huge issue. And I know it's something both you and I are passionate about, Tom, but let's be completely honest, climate change is at the forefront of most people's minds, full stop. And I think more, if there is going to be money towards green infrastructure, will be geared more towards climate change, would be the way I see things going. So this has to kind of tackle onto that. But saying that, there has been some great work in parts of Scandinavia. in Stockholm, Malmo in particular, have done some really interesting, cool projects where they've greened parts of their landscape, but they've also really integrated kind of different measures into different kind of stormwater measures as well. So not kind of going anywhere near as far as the Sponge City approach with the amount of money that's gone in, but still doing stuff that provides a benefit.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Is whilst the really big ambitious projects look very exciting, and you are right with climate change, the latest climate change reports come out from the IPCC, and it's quite a scary read when it comes to flooding in certain parts of the world, and in certain parts of the UK in particular. There are some localized measures that you can employ, from sort of rainwater harvesting tanks to sort of localized small scale ponds that can all hopefully, as you said, make that aggregated marginal gain, hopefully.
Absolutely, and that's it. It's that getting those little gains. As if we, the more we can disconnect, and that's the real key phrase, I suppose. And it's probably a phrase I don't actually use enough. The more we can disconnect from our pipe network, the less we've got going into our rivers, the less we've got going into our watercourses. And neither of us, Tom, are water chemists. We're not we're in terms of we're not water quality people, but we both know the kind of material that runs off our roads. And if most of our kind of surface water sewer systems will eventually find their our surface water drainage systems will find their way invariably into a river. And we need to disconnect as much of that as we can, because we need to clean up our watercourses. We've known that for some time. The Water Framework Directive mandated that. That's very much going into your realm, Tom. I don't want to stress, that's more your background really. But we need to disconnect. We need to do these little, like I say, these small marginal gains, these rainwater harvesting tanks that can really try and remove some of that water.
And there's some really exciting new technologies that I know you touched on in your presentation, that anyone interested in SADs and wants to go away and do some more reading who's watching now, where you can monitor the rainwater that you're collecting in a rainwater harvesting tank, and then use that grey water as water to flush your toilet. And water that doesn't have to be clean drinking water, but is water that you can then use back in your homes. And for climate change purposes and being sustainable in the future, as you said, Craig, with climate change, there isn't just flooding, there's also issues with water insecurity. And so that's water we could then use elsewhere.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it, Tom. It's trying to make sure that we can find ways to reuse our water and use these things in sustainable ways. I mean, you mentioned the rainwater harvesting. I know would have gone through both our minds. The fantastic building I showed, actually, the hub at the university, which has exactly that, a rainwater harvesting tank that links everything together, that takes water from the roof, collects it on its green roof, and then filters it into the rainwater harvesting tank, and then uses that for recirculation for flushing toilet water. I mean, there's a few funny stories behind it, because it wasn't exactly the most successful to begin with. Someone actually tweeted about it this morning, actually, on the Coventry Geography Twitter page, and someone's asked, I need to follow up on that, actually. But it wasn't the most successful to begin with, because they didn't quite get the filter units weren't quite correct, so it wasn't taking out the colour. So even though it was quite pure, it was still quite brown, and it was flushing that through. So that wasn't exactly ideal.
Lovely.
Exactly. They fixed that quite quickly. And we've got two now. We've got two big systems in the university. One in the Students' Union, and one in the I'm pointing as if that means anything.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. And one in the engineering building, which is just behind us.
Actually, I'm pleased you brought it back to the university. As for people watching that might be prospective students that might want to come here, this content regarding sustainable cities and SUDs and general water management, how's it covered through the course? I know it's something you're very involved in throughout. We both are. But
yeah, I was going to say.
Could you give an overview? Just for people
of course.
Listening?
I mean, I suppose simply speaking, Tom and I try and get this stuff in at any given opportunity. Let's be honest. But yeah, so we have a history in water research at Coventry University. Going back to the late 80s with people like Chris Pratt, who was one of the early pioneers for SUDS and permeable pavement. And then going through the 90s with Ian Foster and Sue Charlesworth. I know this is a bit of a history trip, but just bear with me. You know, Ian Foster and Sue Charlesworth, and then through to people like Frank Warwick, myself, and Tom, with lots of other researchers as well interspersed behind that. But water has always had a real strong part to play at Coventry University. We had a SUDS applied research group up until a few years ago, which merged with the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience that we now have, this massive, fantastic research centre with loads of members of staff researching in some of the key issues globally about agroecology, water and resilience. So I suppose what I'm trying to get at is we've always had that history of underpinning water and sustainable hydrological processes and practices into our degree. So at first year, we kind of do some of the introductory stuff, it's fair to say. We will mention it a little bit, but it's very at the introductory level, more hydrological processes. But it's at second and third year where we start to really apply things. And I think that's the beauty of our degree, actually. I think, you know, I actually put up a tweet. We're doing a thing at the moment on Twitter, Cov Jog Jobs. Got to get it the right way around. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. But looking at the roles that our alumni have gone into, and I'm really proud that lots and lots of our geographers go into hydrology-based jobs, because we have it applied at quite a lot of levels. So we do, we introduce SUDS and talk a bit about policy at year 2 in a module called Rivers and Coasts on the physical geography degree. On our hazards degree, we have a module in hydrometeorological hazards. So that's very much about catchment processes and actual flood processes, and trying to look at pluvial flooding. So we do kind of talk about SUDS, but we keep it more on the actual mechanisms of flooding rather than management. And then at final year, our hazard students actually do a module called Natural Hazard Management, which is run by myself. So as you can imagine, has a nice bit of SUDS and sustainable flood management in it, really. So about myself and Tom. And we in that module, we actually run the field trip to Leicester. So we take our final year hazard students over to Leicester to have a wander around the site and actually start to get to see what can be done and what's possible. And I really think it's a strength of our degree, the application of all of what we do.
Yeah, definitely. As Craig touched on, we're all active researchers. We're all sort of dead sad and very interested in our very niche disciplines, but they have real world applications. And for all our students, they do get to go on these amazing field trips. I know going around Leicester might not sound the most exotic, but you actually get to see some really exciting schemes.
We do other trips as well. We don't just take people to Leicester.
Yeah.
We do lots of other amazing trips. I mean, our first years today are actually in the Peak District. I don't know if it was best day weather-wise. We had some shocking weather about midday in Coventry. A huge, a big trail of storm cloud must have come. It came directly over our building, and it was pretty bad for a bit with hail. But yeah, no, we do lots of trips, and I think that for me is what geography is about, isn't it?
And very much sort of national and international context. And I'm sure a lot of the stuff that Craig covered very much is internationally applicable. And so any students that are interested in studying geography and interested in going to geography in any sort of discipline, because it's such a broad church, you're developing skills that would put you in a really good position for careers internationally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, the thing, I won't name specific companies, but we have links with quite a few who we will, periodically take our students because of their hydrology background.
Yeah. So if we, more questions.
Sorry,
Craig, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So quite a sort of pertinent one regarding COP26 coming up. This all sounds very applicable to COP26. Do you think it will have more significance during or after? What influence do you think that this COP26 could have on some of the content that you covered?
It's a good point. My hope is that we're going to have, we know. I think there's going to be more. I'm hoping more of an understanding of kind of what the impacts are going to be on flood risk. As you mentioned earlier, Tom, the Met Office and the IPCC reports are quite damning in terms of what we're going to see. The Environment Agency came out last week or 2 weeks ago, and I can't quite remember the quote that was used, but it was some quite heavy-hitting words, you know, saying that people will be impacted. And I think they may have even used the word killed. I can't quite remember. I definitely tweeted about it last week. And we know that this is going to happen. It's going to start to impact people. So the beauty with things like SUDS, particularly the green side of things, you know, it's not just the permeable pavement, but the things like green roofs and swales, is that you get the carbon sequestration benefit. And that is the thing that we really, you know, Tom and I will focus on when we talk about all of our kind of sustainable flood management stuff. We will always think about the flooding side because that's what we do. We're able to computer model that because that's what our background is. But actually, you know, we know that we need to start to sequester carbon. We need to capture more carbon, and we need to turn that into oxygen. And we don't just want our urban spaces to be polluters of carbon. We need to be capturing and storing it and changing it and actually reducing our carbon output. So I think that I'm hopeful that we can use that as a way of further engagement of SUDS. That's my hope anyway. The problem is there are probably more flashy, effective ways, you could argue, that might make, you know, and that there are some excellent, you know, initiatives. I don't know. I'm hopeful. I am really hopeful that we might see a bit of a sea change or step change in policy. We had the government review last year, and there's been quite a bit of money spent from the government on kind of developing innovative methods for flood management. And I think it is very much something they understand and is on their mind, particularly after Kira and, oh God, that is going to test me. Storm Kira, Storm Dennis and Jorge last year, you know, and the flooding we saw.
I think it's a crucial point that a lot of the technologies that Craig has referred to and methods that we're referring to are not necessarily a technology, something that was done centuries ago, but we're just restoring those practices, do have lots of multiple benefits, and carbon sequestration is one of them. So yeah, hopefully from COP26, you know, the focus on trying to get to that net zero, you know, going beyond just getting to net zero and thinking about, well, how can we try and deal with some of the carbon that's already in our atmosphere? And yeah, Craig mentioned, you know, I think trees in your presentation, sponge cities. A great sponge for terrestrial carbon is peatlands. We've got a colleague, Dr. Farrell, very interested in peatlands and how peatlands have been managed historically. And there's a great scheme. I'm deviating off into my stuff, Craig.
It's great, Tom, it's great.
But yeah, great scheme up in the Peak District where they've restored peat for flood management reasons, but as well as multiple benefits, one of which is storing carbon. So yeah, really exciting stuff.
Yeah, we have actually had a question come in which was more about some of the specifics of what we're likely to see in a changing climate. And actually, if I can just very, very quickly see if I can get hold of the UKC. It's a bit of a difficult interface to navigate, but the CPA team programme, the UK Climate Projections from the Met Office is an excellent kind of tool to kind of use, I think, because it gives you a nice overview of, and quite simply speaking, shows you what's going to happen. And they've got a visualization tool in your area which you can use. And really, anyway, what it's kind of showing, I was just trying to find it while I was talking, but I think it'll take too long, is we are going to see this variation of rainfall. And obviously, I will kind of say, Tom and I, again, I'll say we talk a lot about flooding, but actually that's only one half of a coin. In the future, we're going to see our summers are likely to become a bit drier, and that's what the projections show. You know, some parts of the UK, particularly the southeast, where we have most of our weather comes from the west, particularly our rainfall comes from there. It's not always, but most of our rainfall comes from the west, from the Atlantic. So we have a huge rain shadow across the country. So broadly speaking, the west is quite wet, the east is quite dry. There are a few variations in that, but it stands pretty true. You know, some of the wettest parts are Snowdon, the northwest of Scotland, whereas even, you know, you go to Aberdeen and then you go down, you're looking at much drier places. And the difference is what we're going to see is these places that are already quite dry, particularly in parts of the southeast, are going to become even drier. Up to 20% was some of the projections from the Met Office at their kind of middle range expectations, and that's significant. 20% reduction on already, when you're looking at about 600 millimeters a year, that's getting problematic.
An area, as you said, referring back to your presentation title, an area that's heavily populated with lots of quite big cities and towns and urban areas that require lots of water. Some of which is from quite a lot of which is from groundwater as well. So these are it's all scary stuff.
Yeah, and so that in terms of what's going to happen, the thoughts are that even the wettest parts, we're going to likely see a reduction in rainfall in the summer, but the actual annual availability will probably increase. That's the thought. I won't go into the atmospheric reasons why. That's another seminar. But ultimately, there's more warmer things have more capacity to carry moisture. Hot air can hold more moisture. So if the air is going to be warmer, it will pick up more moisture. So across the year, that's a very simple overview. But basically, what will happen? So our areas across the year, we will get wetter, and we're pretty much going to see that in our winter. So but because we're going to be warmer, that precipitation will fall not as snowfall, but more often as rainfall. And that's really why I think going back to COP, it's so important that these discussions are had and are continued to be had with our local kind of policymakers.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a way I always think about the climate change impacts is that it's a resource that will be increasingly harder to forecast, because we're going to have some really intense storms and then some prolonged dry periods. That's about right, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah, no, it is.
And so if you're a farmer trying to grow crops and you're having really long dry periods, that'll be really hard. And if you're accessing water for groundwater drinking, that also be really hard, because these are aquifers that could become dry.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Is there anything? There's no more questions. There was the only one real question that came in. Was there anything else that you noticed that came in, Tom?
No more questions from me that have come in, Craig. No.
No, that's fantastic. Well, that's taken us to 28 minutes. So I think that's a pretty nice number there to get to, alongside my kind of 20-minute video. So I hope you found this useful. I hope you found this kind of an engaging thing. If you've got any other comments, any other questions, post this. I'm always happy to have a chat with people. So I'm always happy to do another live session if there's enough questions that come in. But use my email address. Send me an email, craig.lashford@coventry.ac.uk. If you've got any questions for Tom, I can forward them to Tom, so just send me an email. It's all good. If you've got any questions about the course, any of the geography degrees, send me an email. Obviously, I'm course director for BSc Geography, and my colleagues, Dr. Jade Catterson and Dr. Charlie Hill Butler, are course directors for BA and Geography and Natural Hazards, respectively. But I can forward stuff to them. It's not a problem. So send me an email, and I should be able to send stuff over. So I think we're good. So we're going to come up again so there's going to be another webinar posted in 2 weeks' time. That'll be with Jade, actually. I can't remember the title off the top of my head. I think it was on an aging population, I seem to recall. Or no, it wasn't. It was on. I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to try and make it. I'll put it up on Twitter soon in the next few days. But that will be released 2 weeks. That'll be released the first Wednesday of November, and then mine will follow. Sorry, not mine. The Q&A will follow a further 2 weeks later than that. So please keep an eye out for the flyer. Otherwise, thank you all very much, and thank you, Tom, so much for kind of hosting and sharing the questions and fielding all the questions. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, and thank you for a great presentation. It was really interesting. Thanks a lot, Craig.
Thank you all. See you later.